it's a tactic. It's the intentional tactic that we're seeing anti-rights and anti-gender movements and states that are, regressive, authoritarian, trying to attack and to take us back, quite honestly, pre-Beijing, and really target the issues of gender equality.
How are women's rights, and especially sexual and reproductive health and rights, faring at the United Nations these days? Our expert, Kemi Akinfaderin, will walk us through recent United Nations negotiation on sexual and reproductive health and rights, women's rights, and sustainable development. She'll discuss with me what's been possible this past couple of years, where have been the tension points and the sticking points, and how we can look forward across the next few years with social movements from different sectors. Please join us. Hello, I'm Françoise Girard, and welcome to the Famous podcast. Today we're going to talk about a topic that's dear to my heart, which is how are women's rights, and especially sexual and reproductive health and rights, faring at the United Nations these days. And in order to discuss this, we have an expert. We have Kemi Akinfaderin, who is the Chief Global Advocacy Officer at FOS Feminista, a feminist advocacy alliance to advance sexual and reproductive health and rights in the Global South. She is based in Nigeria and is talking to us from Abuja in Nigeria today. Kemi is a powerhouse advocate for women's rights at the UN and one of the most astute observers of the multilateral scene that I've ever had the privilege to work with. She has also led grant-making and technical support portfolios at the Equality Fund and at Prospera, the international network of women's funds. Before that, and that's when we met, Kemi was the executive director of Education as a Vaccine, a fabulous Nigerian organization that advances, is still very active, children and young people's right to health and protection from violence through advocacy, lobbying for legislation, and direct services. She has a bachelor in chemistry from Wesleyan University and a master's in public health from Columbia University. And she describes herself as a big dreamer and serial entrepreneur who loves to laugh out loud. What could be better than that? This is what there's nothing here that I don't love. So several weeks ago, I had the pleasure of interviewing Geeta Sen of DAWN and the Global South Coalition for Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights and Development Justice, who's been a mentor to you and to me and many of us on issues of sexual and reproductive health and international advocacy. And Geeta told me that she had recently re-engaged in UN spaces because she felt there was still plenty to do there, as frustrating as the UN can sometimes be. So, Kemi, you obviously believe that the United Nations and its agencies are still spaces where we can move forward sexual and reproductive health and rights, women's rights, and development justice. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing right now. And since the year 2026 began, you've been deeply involved in at least 3, maybe more, main political negotiation spaces: the Commission on the Status of Women in New York, the Commission on Population and Development, also at UN headquarters in New York, and more recently, the World Health Assembly in Geneva. So can you tell us a little bit, before we go into the analysis part, what were the main topics of debate and negotiation at each of these from your perspective? I mean, there's many things going on there, but what were you hoping to achieve as a feminist advocate in each of these spaces this year? Maybe we should start with the CSW.
CSW,
yeah.
The all-famous CSW. But thanks so much, Françoise, for having me on this call.
It's my
really excited
privilege.
to to really be able to share some of these experiences and also the work that Force Feminista has been doing as an organization, but also enabling and supporting feminist organizations to engage in these institutions, to continue to advance as a platform, as one of many platforms. So really quick, those are the three that have been quite heavy on my mind and have taken up a lot of my time, as well as the UN80 reform process. I want to throw that in there because it's a big one as well, and really is going to shape what the future of the UN looks like in terms of just as a mechanism, as a space for feminist organizations and women's rights organizations to continue to advance their rights. So CSW, the all famous CSW, and I think this year was a famous one because we saw unprecedented action and strategy by different member states in this space. And this year, CSW was focused on access to justice, an issue that's so critical and so important to many feminists, especially when we're looking at the issues related to ending gender-based violence, when we're thinking about issues around reproductive rights violations, when we're thinking about even universal access to healthcare. Access to justice is such a critical part because it's about states' obligations. And so this was an opportunity to really enshrine and to continue to advance with, new areas that are emerging, right, on and how access to justice can help the realization of rights for women and girls and gender diverse folks. And it was a tough one. I think generally I think I walked away from that process knowing that multilateralism is still important to many member states. I walked away with a clear sense that member states do have commitments to ensuring access to justice, with the exception of maybe one or two that were being quite challenging and difficult in the space. But it seemed like there was actually an intention to be able to work and to negotiate. There were new things that we thought that would have been put on the table. And even like, for example, conversations around climate justice and access to justice, especially for those that are in extremely vulnerable and precarious situations as a result of the climate crises. That was something that was put at the table, but people thought that there was going to be an opportunity to connect it even further. Or, for example, when we look at the issues related to queer rights and access to justice, when we look at the issues related to, for example, the issues related to sexual and reproductive health and rights and violations in relation to access to safe abortion as another area, we thought we were going to actually make a bit of progress there. But we know the challenge that sort of like ensues in this moment in time, in this political climate. And we just wanted to make sure that we had an outcome. It might have not necessarily addressed all the elements, but we thought it was extremely important to have an outcome. And this was probably one of the first time that we actually had a voted outcome at a CSW. And that was primarily because of the United States.
And when we say an outcome, for those who are not familiar, it's to have an agreement, coming out with a paper agreement. And normally it's by consensus, people give and take, governments give and take, but then eventually they can say, yes, I can agree with that, and they don't vote. But in this case, the U.S. basically forced to vote, right?
Forced to vote.
And prevented consensus.
Yes, twice. Forced to vote twice. I think the first vote was really on the text itself and wanting to push back on many issues. And that for us was unacceptable. And then try to introduce another vote specifically to force member states to reopen Beijing. And to redefine what gender means in Beijing when it's very clear to what member state had agreed over 30 years ago. So it's a tactic. It's the intentional tactic that we're seeing anti-rights and anti-gender movements and states that are, regressive, authoritarian, trying to attack and to take us back, quite honestly, pre-Beijing, and really target the issues of gender equality as we see, in today.
In the reopening agreements from 30 plus years ago. Exactly. Like nothing is ever solid, right? They always want to question everything from from ground zero, right? So that's very difficult. So in the end, the document was adopted.
The document was adopted, even though it was by vote. The amendment that they had introduced to define what gender was kicked out, was voted out. And so we saw it as a major win. We saw it an extremely major win. Force Feminista coordinates the Women's Rights Caucus with other co-conveners, as you know. And this was a lot of hard work of the feminists that really sat down and pushed day to day, supporting member states and really trying to make sure that the arguments are very clear, but also the lived experience from folks from around the world. This was also one of the years that was really difficult, Françoise, for feminists from the global south to be at CSW.
Yes.
And this is also part of the United States agenda of limiting civil society and limiting people's presence at the UN. So we had many feminist organizations from across the world that could not get to CSW. This was probably the most empty I have experienced at CSW in a long time, other than pre-COVID, when we were just getting back. And so you had many folks from the global south that were not able to be in the room. But the great thing is that when we convene spaces like the Women's Rights Caucus, regardless of if they're physically there, people have the opportunity to follow the process as best as they can, but they also have the opportunity to bring their opinions and their thoughts. And we strategize together, even across borders, even with visa restrictions and bonds. We're able to strategize together and get this done. So that was a major win. We had to take 1 or 2 days after that to sleep because it was nonstop over the night. You know how it is. You've been in the trenches with us many times in the past, but this one was particularly instrumental and quite, I think, quite important, that we showed the world that even with a big power like the United States playing a very interesting game, the world still stands together for gender equality.
That's right. No pasarán. They will not succeed. Yeah, and it's really important what you're describing of feminist groups, which often have a very long institutional memory, right? You know, they remember Beijing, they remember, and if they don't remember because they weren't there at the time, they're too young, they've been taught by their elders and mentored by elder feminists who can educate them as to what the gender negotiation in Beijing was about and why we can't accept this language that seeks to reduce gender to biological sex. That's just not where we're at anymore. And they're probably surprised, right? That, well, I mean, wow, they immediately reacted. The feminists, advised the governments, because some of the governments themselves don't know, because they're not experts in all of this. And so they're able to immediately, the feminist presence are able to immediately react. And that's incredibly important.
Yes, it is. And I think that beauty, we've consistently seen it across the spaces. If I come to CPD, which was focused on technology and sustainable development, it was another, I would say, battleground but for different reasons. And this is it's the paradox in terms of working in the UN. And in this situation, we saw a lot of issues play across geopolitical lines. And I'm sure Geeta spoke a little bit about this as well in her previous blog, because we were together and working with the Global South Coalition as Force Feminist, as one of the co-conveners of the Global South Coalition for Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights and Development Justice, but also our work with the ICERC as well.
Which is a coalition of sexual and reproductive health and rights groups from around the world, right?
Around the world, yes. And so this time around, it was really like, I think what is quite important to note here is that in this particular one, we had an African government, a particular member state that was leading the negotiation this time, and that was was Burundi that was actually leading this. Just as we had the amazing work of Ambassador Chen for Costa Rica for CSW, and I have to give her a shout out because she she was on top of it. She was on top of it and did an amazing work. And that's why we need to have feminists also in those spaces, holding down the fort as well in government. But in this particular time, we had an African government that was leading as the chair of the Bureau. And as you know, the issues of technology is one that's extremely important to the Global South and extremely important to member states, not just in Africa, but, across the Global South as a whole. And I think one of the things that I walked away with was a very strong willingness by many African states, strong willingness by many of the Latin American member states to negotiate. They wanted to have an outcome. It was extremely important to have an outcome. At this CPD for a wide range of reasons. The UN 80 reforms and the fact that there is going to be review of some mandates, you understand, for some commissions. The fact that we have not had an outcome in like 3 years. We did not have for health. We did not have for education. One of the years was a commemoration year. And this particular year was on technology. And there were a wide range of issues. We saw the anti-rights and anti-gender movement, and particularly many of those NGOs like CFAM, like Citizens Go, like, World
Family
Youth
Watch
Congress,
International.
Family Watch International, they were
there.
They descended on CPD this year. Another space where we didn't have as many, feminist organizations participating, usually even less than CSW. And lay on top those structural barriers of visas and things like that, made it even in terms of like just the number of us that were in the space, quite limited. But even with our smaller numbers, we really tried our best. We really pushed to look at, issues around tech transfer, especially as it helps us to deliver universal health care and also sexual and reproductive health and rights as part of UHC, universal health coverage and care. We looked at it in terms of looking at government's ability to be able to produce technologies and products around SRHR, menstrual health products, for example, on their continent, and this connecting, and I'm going to talk about WHO, to some of these movements around sovereignty and ability to have commodities and have health products that are produced on their soil. You understand? And their purchasing power for these products as a critical part of that. There was also on the table the issue of how also technology is being used to roll back rights, whether it is in terms of issue of privacy and surveillance, or around, some of the safeguards we need to put on these big tech, and even the censorship big tech has on even health information and particularly SRHR information in the digital space. These are critical issues that we wanted to push. So not just in terms of just calling for, proliferation of technology and AI, but also recognizing the importance to be able to put safeguards in place to safeguard people, especially even when we talk about the issues of technology-facilitated violence and what we are seeing now with, the meta glasses and all of these things that are happening in terms of women and the doxing, etc. And so technology was a really important one. We had it a couple of years ago for CSW. We had on technology, I would say about 3 years ago, that was a theme. So bringing it into the contents of, sustainable development and technology, we thought we were going to make some headway. And we did not get an outcome. We did not get an agreement from member states.
And there was no vote.
There was no vote, which was great. That was very important to not have a vote. But we didn't get an agreement, a collective agreement. And I have to give it to the chair. He tried his best to get an agreement. He wanted an agreement. And the African group really worked hard to see how they could have gotten an agreement. We also saw member states, from the global north engaging on content on family. The issue of family, Françoise, have been mentioned multiple times and has been seen as being anti-SRHR. But we are now seeing governments talking about how we can talk about families and how to support
multiple forms of families.
Multiple forms of families, but looking at family also as a site to be able to channel care, supportive care, reducing the burden on women and girls. So like all of these connections, thinking about how we can use technology to make sure that we actually have stronger families in plural, and that the rights of the individual within the families are protected and upheld.
Right.
And so it gave me a lot. There were a lot of good things I took away from this CPD. I felt that, member states still care, even though we still have to hold them accountable. I'm not going to glorify them on this podcast, but there were some member states that still did care, but we still can't get over certain humps.
Yeah. And can you clarify for the listeners why you were welcoming a vote at the Commission on Status of Women in March, but we're happy there wasn't a vote at the Commission on Population Development a month later in, the same building, with some of the same governments, right? So why was it okay to have a vote at the CSW, but not okay for the CPD?
To be honest with you, we did not want to vote at CSW. It's not a good precedent.
Yeah.
It's not a great thing.
Yeah.
And so we didn't necessarily celebrate it as a win because we got a vote. Our first choice would have been no vote. But in the event that we had to have a vote, which was where we were backed into a corner.
That's where the chair was taking you, the chair of the negotiation.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, the U.S. forced our hand into a vote.
Demanding a vote.
Hand.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we had the numbers on our side, and it worked well.
Okay.
Unfortunately, if we had gone that way with CPD, it would have been a different outcome. But
why is that? Because technology, the dividing lines are different for technology?
The divisions are slightly different. So it depends on how we look at it. If we're looking at it in terms of SRHR, which is the focus of our organization, we would have probably not gotten a good outcome, because it's quite possible that some member states could have asked for a vote only on the paragraph that referenced SRHR.
Yeah, sexual and reproductive.
And that would have been a major loss.
Yes.
But
you weren't sure.
There could have also been some governments that actually could have called for a vote on issues related to tech transfers.
Yeah.
And issues related to the TRIPS agreement, for example.
To the global south. Yeah.
And that would be detriment to the global south. So as working for FOSS, which is a global south-led organization, we want both. We want both the technology and we want SRHR. We don't see them as being two separate things.
Right.
And hence also the amazing work we're doing under the Global South Coalition. We want both. We see the tech transfers, we see the TRIP agreements, we see the debt issues as the structural elements that would enable people to realize their rights to sexual and reproductive health. So if you don't address those issues, what is the point of having a document that references SRHR? But when you get to the ground, governments in the global south are not able to deliver it because they're not able to manufacture their own products and make it cheaper for their citizens and have to rely on importation.
That's right.
And
donors.
Everything that's happening right now with the global value chain, it's extremely challenging. Look at we've heard news about difficulties in terms of access to condoms in this moment in time,
right? Because
of the war in the Middle East, and so these are things that has prompted us to think quite differently. COVID was the perfect example for us to learn from, and so we wanted both. If it was going to be about a vote that would have allowed us to lose one or the other, we didn't want that.
That's right. Okay. Yeah. Got it.
Didn't want that.
Yeah.
So I think this dovetails me into WHO.
Yeah, where technology is front and center, right?
Yes. Right now, there's a lot of conversation around the PABs, which is the pandemic agreement, and the pathogen sharing agreement right now. But there was, I think, the one thing before I jump into the PABs, the one thing that was very clear to me in this WHO was that the buzzword for the day was sovereignty.
Ooh.
The buzzword, every panel that we went to, it was talking about sovereignty, domestic financing, which is quite interesting because when I was there last year, this was when the ODA cuts had just hit.
Yeah.
And there was a bit of a gloom at the World Health Assembly, in which people were, I guess, in that immediate shock.
In shock, yeah,
The
absolutely.
immediate shock, and starting to realize some of the problems, actually, the closing down of clinics, the shutting down of HIV services, and sort of grappling with our health system is in shock.
Yeah,
right
what
now.
are we going to do?
And what are we going to do? And so when you look at that arc to this year, we started hearing a little bit about, yes, we've gotten over this. And the president of Ghana, for example, was one government that spoke very, very clear and didn't mince his words about it's time for the global South and it's time for Africa to take responsibility for the health of its citizens. On paper, Françoise, amazing.
Yeah.
Great.
Who can disagree?
No one can disagree.
Yeah.
It sounds perfect. We're hearing this call in Africa. We're hearing this call in Latin America, with governments talking about commodities and how they can actually move to have more commodity security on the Latin American Caribbean continent. And we're here for it. We're here for it. Those of us that are activists, those of us that work for, Global South organizations, we are here for it. We want to hear more governments talk about how they're going to put their mouth and their money behind health.
Right.
But a comprehensive health agenda, not one that throws SRHR under the bus.
Or maternal health or women's health in general. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
we are not for that. And that's why it's extremely important to be in these spaces, to continue to shed the light on the importance of sexual and reproductive health, women's health, maternal health, adolescent health.
Yeah.
In this space.
Yeah.
And, it was great to be in community with the likes of PMNNCH, the Partnership for Maternal, Newborn,
Child
Health and Adolescent. It's a long acronym.
Yeah.
But it was great. Force Feminista has just joined the partnership.
Oh, great.
As a member of the NGO constituency and one of the co-chairs of that constituency. I serve on that. And to really elevate the importance of women, adolescent health on the agenda as we have the conversation around sovereignty. So what are they talking about when they say sovereignty? They're talking about three major things. They're talking about the importance for a one plan, one budget, one reporting approach. So ensuring and putting in place and putting at the center government's priority. It has to be the government's agenda and funding. So no more parallel programs, no more, vertical programs.
Donor-driven,
No donor-driven agenda. This has to be about the priorities of the government. And we agree. We agree in that because, this withdrawal taught us a lot of things. When USAID was illegally dismantled, and I have to keep saying it everywhere I am.
It was.
Illegally dismantled.
Totally illegally.
Totally illegally dismantled. What we saw was when governments were looking for data, it was not with them. It was with USAID.
My God.
So what happened? People were not able to actually own their own data. How are they making decisions?
Yeah.
You understand? And so I think that this one plan, one budget, one reporting is great. It's absolutely great. The second piece is about how do they mobilize more domestic resourcing to support health.
Yeah.
So two parts of that: more money for health, but also more health for the money.
Right.
What's the message?
Efficiency.
So the more health for the money, it's the efficiency, it's closing loopholes, it's improving procurement processes so that we reduce wastage. It's about looking at integrated services, how we're working with community healthcare workers, extension workers to deliver, especially primary healthcare services in a way that's integrated. And it's also in a way that is linked to the life cycle of people. And particularly for women and girls, that's extremely important because you cannot separate the different needs as they go through their life from each other. They can't be in different clinics and in different rooms. It has to be an integrated approach. So I think that we're all for that. I think it's great that we're looking at more health for the money,
Yeah.
but then also more money for health. And so there's a lot of conversation about innovative financing, looking at issues like sin tax, so taxing things like sugary beverages, and taxing tobacco as a way of delivering, of course, health outcomes, but through these taxes, but also generating additional income to support the health agenda. They talked a lot about development finance, and particularly looking at how governments can have partnership with public-private sector to be able to bring resources, the banks to bring resources and outcome financing around that. And I think these are all great initiatives that, I think many governments are exploring and looking at. And I think what I heard from this particular WHA was more of, this is what we are exploring.
Yeah.
This is what we're looking at. We're testing out things. I'm looking forward to next year's WHA to say, these are the results. This is what we have achieved.
That's right.
And here are some of, even if they are not getting to the point of outcomes, which is like change in population data and stuff, but let us see, how much money have you been able to save? How much more money have you brought into the health system? How many more community healthcare workers have you been able to fund? How many more commodities, family planning commodities, contraceptive commodities have you been able to finance? How many social enterprise and businesses and manufacturers are you investing in to produce these commodities? How have you changed the legislative frameworks to make it easier for them to produce these things? But how have you also changed legislative frameworks to enable those most at risk, those most marginalized and criminalized to access health?
Yeah.
You understand? These are the things we want to see when you say you have a sovereignty agenda.
Yeah.
You understand? That's where we want to see, how are reporting systems strengthened? Where is the data? Where are the frameworks for protecting data? And how are you using that data to support planning, but also how are citizens able to access that data for accountability?
That's right.
That's what we're looking forward to hear. But next year.
A real comprehensive vision of what that could look like. Now, there's been a lot of tensions around the PABs, the pandemic pathogen access and benefit sharing annex to the pandemic agreement, which was agreed last year at the World Health Assembly. And now the negotiations on this annex on pathogen access and benefit sharing are quite difficult, because there's real tension there between the global north, right, which has control over vaccines and increasingly a lot of data from the south, and we'll talk about why that is the case. But and their real reluctance to share the benefits of scientific progress. I mean, we saw that with the COVID pandemic, where even though the pathogen came from China and was shared openly, the benefits, the vaccines, were not shared with the global south openly, and a lot of countries went without vaccines or treatments or even diagnostics for the duration of the pandemic, and probably even today. So that's become a real sticking point. So how's that playing out? Like, what did you see this year in terms of the negotiations and how that was going?
Honestly, they didn't have an agreement. They could not come to an agreement.
It's difficult, right?
And this mirrored what we saw at CPD. It's exactly where you had many of the member states from the global south. And I have to say, once again, I'm extremely proud of the African negotiators that push back on this and says, this needs to be about equity.
Yeah.
This is a global common good. I think, Right Honorable Helen Clark used that word throughout this WHA. It's about the global common good. We are all connected together, and the pandemic and pandemics that we have seen or will see in the future is connecting all of us. So we all have to have equal access. I remember during COVID being in Zambia and having to make very interesting decisions in terms of who in our family will get it first, because we were only allotted one slot.
One vaccine?
Yes, the COVID vaccine. We had to make a decision between my husband and I and my niece who was going to get it first while we wait.
Wow.
And so this is not an abstract issue.
No.
I have
You
the
lived it. Yeah.
lived experience and the anxiety. And I was someone that was traveling for work. You understand, worries about, yes, we didn't have aged parents living with us, but having to decide, a husband, a wife, a niece, to say, who should we prioritize first? This is the reality of many, many communities and many countries.
That's right.
And so it's extremely painful that we are putting profits over people, because the debate here is not about people. It's about companies.
Yeah.
It's about big pharma,
Yeah.
who produce these testing kits, who produce the vaccines, and them wanting to make profit first.
That's right. That's right.
Versus putting people first. And unfortunately, they are enabled by the governments where they're based in the global north.
The system
American government
supports that.
European government.
Yeah.
And this is extremely painful to see that for an issue that affected all of us,
Yes.
even though in different ways, we still have not learned our lesson to say, you know what, on this issue, we're going to put people first. And so, but unfortunately, our lack of ability to come to, as a global community, as a global health community, to come to an agreement of this, gives space for individual governments like the United States to go behind the scene and continue to negotiate bilaterally to their advantage.
That's right. That's right.
So it's really important for governments to actually agree so that they can plug that loophole. Because many African governments, many Latin American governments, because those are primarily and about 3 in Asia now, have signed these global health compacts with the United States.
The bilateral agreements.
Bilateral agreements with the United States. And the issues of pathogen sharing is in there. Just as there's also issues related to data sharing and access to data for how much. For how much. The Nigerian government signed an MOU for 5.1 million. The Nigerian government is bringing 3.1. That's it.
That's all they got?
Nigerian government is bringing majority of the money. 3.1.
Oh. Yeah.
3.1. And so you have to ask yourself, how much do your people's lives cost?
Matter to you. Yeah. Yeah.
It's definitely for the number of people that is in this country, it's definitely more than $2 million.
Yeah.
We don't need that money.
No.
And many countries, I understand there are certain contexts, there are certain countries that do need that resource. But this is where the collective really matters.
Yeah.
This is what we need. We need global South governments to come together and to negotiate as a bloc.
Yeah, yeah.
So they can't pick one off at a time. They need to negotiate together, just like the EU negotiates together. There is a value.
You can't pick them off. Yeah, yeah.
You can't pick them off. And you provide covering and support for those that are in a more precarious and vulnerable situation. And you all can get a better deal. And we see now also, as part of this Accra reset that President Mama has put forward, there's also going to be some work in building capacities of, particularly in the African context, negotiators on the issues of trade, on the issues of health, to better position Africa to be able to make these decisions collectively. But I think that this is not just about Africa. I think this is across the global South.
That's right.
We need this across the global South, even though these were the conversations that were quite, I would say, quite visible at this WHO. So we need to get the PABs annex agreed to, and we need to get it agreed to quickly. Quickly. You know, DG Tedros talks all the time that it's not a matter of if we're going to have another pandemic or not. It's a matter of the when. And the better that we are prepared and have all of these issues sorted, the better it is for everyone.
Right.
Let's remember the global common good. This is solidarity in practice.
That's right. I mean, it's really unfortunate that the US managed in this last year, even as they caused so much wreckage by dismantling USAID and cutting so much of their foreign assistance, that they managed to have enough wherewithal, surprising, because there's a lot of things they're not doing very well, to negotiate these bilateral agreements with, 50 plus countries to basically say, you'll get our foreign assistance on the condition you give us your health data and also give us access to your mineral resources, which is totally unrelated. But, and countries felt so trapped that they agreed to that. And now they're stuck. I mean, they've signed agreements that are not that, as you say, that advantageous. It's not that much money. And they've given away a lot of very, very valuable resources. Yeah. It speaks to the desperation of some of these countries. It also speaks, I think, to the lack of strategic thinking. And as you say, the lack of the reflex of collective action. It just isn't there, right? So
I think it's an absolute, it's disappointing.
Yeah.
To see that across the board.
It's terrible.
It's majority in African countries. We have about 4 or 5 Latin American countries that are signing, and we have 3 in Asia, in Asia, not in the Pacific, in Asia, that are well, I would say 2. And the Philippines has expressed an interest or an intent to sign. And so this is, for me, it's this question of how much more money can governments in the global South be able to generate when the macroeconomic systems are stacked against them?
Yeah.
To be able to truly own this and finance this in a transformative way, that they're willing to still take, I don't want to say it's peanuts.
But it's peanuts. I'll say it.
It's peanuts.
For the US, this is nothing. This is nothing.
It's nothing.
No.
It's nothing. But this is also where we have to also hold. This is about big business. This is about big business. It's about big pharma. It's about, the tech bros. They
mining.
Need more data for the data centers. It's about mining. They need the minerals for more phones. And this is what it is. Yeah. And we as people are also consumers of this.
Yes. Yes.
And not thinking and making the connection. I'm happy, to be honest with you, Françoise. I think there's a lot more enlightenment now about the interconnection of all of these issues. We're seeing the connections between SRHR, bodily autonomy, authoritarianism, the rise of corporate capture, the connection with mineral extraction and land extraction. Yeah. We're seeing the connection with the issues of the debt crises and unfair trade deals. It's becoming more and more apparent. And, we do have technology for that to a certain extent. But the question is, while we are having more of this consciousness, what do we do about it?
No, yeah. We need to organize.
What do we do about it? We need to organize. And we need to organize across movements.
Yeah.
Across movements. There are amazing feminists working on trade, the Third World Network and others that are doing really radical things.
Fantastic.
In that area. Those, the likes of Dawn and the think tanks that they're producing, to those working on climate, the likes of Diva, the likes of We Do, working on these things and seeing the intersections. Those of us working on bodily autonomy and gender justice. We really need to connect and really stop in these silos if we want to ensure that everything we put in the SDGs, everything we put in the SDGs is actually realized, because they're all interconnected.
And so let's speak about the Global South Coalition on Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights and Development Justice, because that's something that Force Feminista joined, and I think you're one of the drivers of this, the creation of the Global South Coalition. And that's the idea, right? Is to get together feminists, groups and development groups and people working on sexual and reproductive health and rights from the Global South to break those silos, right? Yeah.
And it's something that we are extremely proud of as FOSS to be part of. It's sits right well with our mission and the mission of many of our partners across the global south. It is a clear recognition that you cannot realize sexual and reproductive health and rights without addressing the foundational, the structural. We always talk about the behavioral elements, but we've not talked about the structural determinants of health.
Right.
And so we are looking at this as addressing the structural determinants of health, and by proxy, SRHR. So this really gives us the opportunity to talk and work with amazing feminists that are doing some of that work, the tax justice work, the debt restructuring and debt forgiveness work. Talking to those that are working on technology and looking at, how are they talking about data systems and protection of data systems, and ownership. I have to talk ownership of data systems as well.
Right.
It really is giving us that opportunity. And I'm extremely happy that we are in, I would say, positively pushing the boundaries with the likes of Dawn, with the likes of PNMCH, with the likes of, Southern AIDS, South African Trust, Southern African Trust, actually, and really being an engine room, APA, the Asia Pacific Alliance on SRHR, to really think through, but working with a broader community of organizations from the global south, from the SWANA region, from Latin America and the Caribbean, to say, first of all, how do we convince ourselves? We need to start with ourselves.
Believing in yourself.
Yes, we need to name ourselves in this and help us to reshape our thinking. To reshape our thinking and to rethink how these issues play into delivering SRHR and universal access to SRHR. And then we need to go on the road and take this to governments. And to be honest with you, many governments have been talking about this. Many governments from the global south have been talking about it, but they've been talking about it also siloed. And not connecting it to SRHR. And we want to get more governments to see that these are intrinsically linked. Your ability to support and to finance contraceptive access is connected to that. And so that they don't see this as a dichotomy and they play it against each other, because it is of no value to anyone. It's of no value to global north governments who have been championing SRHR, for them not to think about how development justice and the right to development is part of that, because it benefits them as well. And it's of no benefit to the global south governments to focus only on the right to development without thinking about how SRHR benefits.
And that's right.
Population.
That's right. Oh, that's fascinating. And I like the part about believing in ourselves, like actually going to make those connections with communities and say, you see, we can't just ask for one thing. We've got to ask for both. And that's okay. We're not being unreasonable. It's actually essential. That's really fascinating. And so how are you working as the Global South Coalition with groups from the Global North? Because they're not always on the same page. Some of them are very siloed. They just work on contraceptives or on abortion or, on adolescence. And they're not necessarily, in some cases, their politics aren't so sharp when it comes to development justice, redistribution of resources, trade relations. I mean, they haven't thought about it, or they're not really prepared to push their own governments on these issues. How do you work with them?
It's not been a very easy thing. I think that this is where we need to, and we have been trying to, first of all, come to the space on the basis of our feminist principle.
Right.
We want SRHR everywhere. And for us to do that, we need to address, like I said, the structural piece. So when I said educate ourselves, I was not just only talking about in the global south.
No.
It also includes our colleagues and our sisters and brothers in the global north to really understand. And this also has to involve a history lesson around colonization, a history lesson that goes back, which makes people very uncomfortable. I mean, look at the United States and this conversation.
Yeah, my goodness.
And so we don't even want to go there. But we have to understand this as a driver of being able to achieve health and being able to achieve universal SRHR. And so it's not been easy. But I think they're also uncomfortable in actually challenging their governments.
Yes.
don't forget that many of our counterparts in the global north are also funded by their governments.
That's right.
So it makes it quite a tricky thing. For you to live to fight another day, are you going to challenge, as we say, the hand that feeds you? It's difficult.
Right.
Very difficult. And so they also need to broaden the tent because there are movements working for better tax justice in those countries.
Absolutely.
There are movements working for debt. And we need to get the SRHR community in the global north that are working with us on a day-to-day basis to shift in the UN to also work with those in their countries that are working on this issue.
Yeah. That's right.
That's where it starts.
Yeah, that's right.
That's where it starts. But we need to also do, I would say, the Lord's work in educating our counterparts, in educating our colleagues, our comrades, like one of my friends says, our comrades in the global north, to say, this is why this matters. And that includes bringing people to tell specific stories, like I just said, about my story in terms of having to make the tough decision in terms of who gets the COVID vaccine first in my household.
Yeah.
Someone that works in the development space, someone that worked in health, have been fighting for, right to health and health equity. And then you have to make those decisions. I think it's those kind of things that would really help people to kind of have their light bulb moment.
Yeah.
But it's not just enough with having the light bulb moment, it's what you do with it.
Yes.
Change the system.
Now what? Yeah. In closing, the last question I wanted to ask you was about this UN reform process that you're also involved with, because there's, the UN is suffering from severe budget cuts as a result of the US not paying its dues, and other governments are also cutting. It's, austerity is the buzzword right now. For better or for worse, and it's led to this plan, UN at 80 years old, to try to find savings, right? And some of which we're very concerned about, right? Because they want to save, of course, money on the back of women, as usual. Surprise, surprise. So I know that FOSS and you in particular have been really involved in trying to shape that conversation to make sure that doesn't happen, that whatever savings, and of course there's going to be cuts. I mean, there's no two ways about it, but that it's not immediately the most vulnerable populations and the most, the least appealing to the big boys, that ends up being cut first. So can you say a few words about how that's playing out and how that, in a way, shapes your understanding of the opportunities at the UN, continued opportunities?
Yeah. To be honest with you, I think, many people have asked me, even on a day-to-day basis, how do you work in the UN? It's a broken system. People say this all the time, and people are not happy. But they're not happy with, I think the issues around the development and the humanitarian part of the UN's work is one question, but people are also not happy around the security issues and the Security Council. And that's driving a lot of this backlash that we see in the UN and to a certain extent, loss of confidence. But I say, I have the opportunity. The UN has given us a platform as civil society, as feminist civil society, to really deliver on some concrete gains. Yeah. We cannot throw the baby out with the bathwater. It is the institution that is helping us to hold up multilateralism, because we do need each other. Yeah. And so we can work with it. We are for reforms. I think many feminists think the system, yes, it's an 80-year-old. People forget it's an 80-year-old institution. It does need reform. Yeah. I do agree that it's not fit for purpose the way it is right now for today's challenges. Right. We agree. Yeah. But what we want is a holistic reform, not cherry picking. And what we have seen put on the table are a couple of things. We have seen the sunsetting on UNAIDS as one of those proposals. We have seen the merger of UN Women and UNFPA as one of those proposals. We have seen that they're putting forward the merger of UNDP and UNOPS, who actually were the same entity before.
They were split up.
They broke it and they want to bring it back. But we get all of these things. But you see, the merger proposal between UNOPS and UNDP is not moving at light speed the way the proposal of UN Women and UNFPA is moving.
Oh, I'm so surprised.
Surprise, surprise. You understand?
Yeah.
And so we're asking ourselves, we understand the fiscal contraction that the UN is going. It's not just the UN, the globe.
Yeah.
Member states are experiencing it, civil society is experiencing it, and we need to do more with the limited resources we have. But governments have to pay their dues. They have to pay their dues. But no one is willing to stand up to say, you have not paid your dues and you are creating this artificial crisis.
That's right. That's right.
And having all of us run around like headless chickens. You understand? That is number one. There needs to be accountability. Governments need to hold themselves to account first.
Yes, yes.
Now, when we come back to the issue on ground, of course, could UN Women and UNFPA do better? Yes, they can. Are there areas where they could strengthen their delivery of their services? Absolutely. Could we save money in some places? Probably. However, we're not saving money for the system to absorb that money away from women's rights and gender equality. We can't. The money between the budgets of these two agencies are so minimal in the first place that there isn't even going to be that much savings. We just launched a cost-benefit analysis with CUNY School of Public Health to really look at and interrogate this proposal that is being put forward by the Secretariat, and to actually interrogate this supposed money they're going to save from the merger. But the upfront cost for the merger is more than the money they're going to save. Who's going to pay for it?
Yeah.
So they're going to take money away from critical services in the humanitarian sector, services from the health system where we're already facing crises, as I spoke about already, to finance a merger.
Yeah.
This is the time we should be doubling down. We barely have 5 years to the end of the SDG.
To the end of the Sustainable Development Goals. Yeah.
We barely. This is where we need to double down. What we need to see the Secretariat actually stand up and say, gender equality is not for sale.
Right.
And for them to move around and say, this is the least resourced issue in the UN system. We need your money.
Right.
And we need your money to make this a reality.
Right. And it's critical to the Sustainable Development Goals because it's in each of the gender and women's rights was really built into that agenda. So
we were together, Françoise. We had sleepless nights.
Yeah, we know that the governments have agreed to this, so they can't just walk away.
And so we want a situation in which women's rights and sexual and reproductive health and rights and gender equality is not the one that is being traded off.
Right.
If the Secretariat is truly committed to reform, they need to look at the entire UN system. If they're focusing on the development arm, where are areas that we could bring together? We have the World Food Program and we have the FAO, I think is the I've even forgotten the meaning of Food and
Agricultural Organization, yeah.
Is there no opportunity to look at better integration end to end? Because that's what we've been told, that bringing UN Women together and UNFPA is about creating end-to-end support for gender equality. Can we not create end-to-end support for food and food systems? Can we not look at, for example, we're talking about UNDP. There are many other institutions we can look at that can come together with UNDP to create end-to-end in the humanitarian sector. The same thing.
Right.
Look, but those are not even on the table. They're not even being considered. So for us, it feels disingenuous.
It says a lot, actually, doesn't it?
It says a lot. It says a lot. So our issues are okay to be put on the chopping block, but you say we can save more money with these other big entities. The money savings is not going to come from a merger of UNAIDS. I mean, of UN Women and UNFPA. No. That's not where it is. You have an organization like UNFPA that has been facing fiscal whiplash, because whenever there is a Republican government in the United States, they lose money. When the Democrats come back, they come back. They've built systems to be able to navigate that. They're not at the budget they were a couple of years ago when they were Democrats, but they're not in a crisis.
Yeah.
So on the other side with UN Women, they're facing serious cuts.
Yeah.
Serious cuts. But UN Women has a triple mandate, and one of its mandate is to ensure mainstreaming of gender across the entire UN system. Where are those budgets for gender, and why is it not funding the work of UN Women?
Yeah, it's not there. Oh.
Where is it? Where's the budget? Where's the gender work in UNICEF? Where's the gender work in the FAO? Where is the gender work in UNDP? Why is that money not being brought to support UN Women to deliver on that pillar? You have to sustain it.
Yeah.
We have the gender action plan, the system-wide gender action plan that the UN Secretary General has put in place to be able to make sure we can deliver gender equality. Where is the money for funding that? Are you expecting that money to come from UN Women's minuscule budget?
Yeah. No, I think, thank you for this, because it just clarifies what we were suspecting was going on, right? And also, it really, to me, through this analysis that we've just gone through, you really clarify the need for the UN to be better, to be effective, to be engaged in the issues in a really hard-hitting way, right? So when people say, "Oh, the UN is in crisis," yeah, of course. I mean, which organization isn't suffering these days? But it's really a space where the debates are going on, where the discussions are happening, where the tough issues are on the table. That's maybe why it has. It's not easy, working in that multilateral space, but there's lots of really meaningful, hard-hitting, difficult conversations going on there. So I think just this time we just spent together really highlights this for me. It's very, very clear. Yeah. So
the one message I want to just put, Françoise, is because there's been also this impression that feminists don't want reform. Oh, no.
What?
We always want to reform the institution.
Just because we don't want to merge UNFPA and yeah,
yes.
no.
That's what some people have said. We want reforms, but we want reforms that will deliver, not reforms that will set us back pre-Beijing.
Yeah, correct.
We don't want that.
That's right. We don't want to go back to before the International Conference on Population Development 94 and the Beijing Platform in 95, which is basically what some of that is about, right? They just want to get rid of reproductive rights and, all that sexuality stuff and gender.
And gender equality.
Yeah, gender equality. Like, we just want to do women's political participation and yeah.
I mean, even that is even on question. I mean, just a couple of days ago, we see that child marriage is back in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
If there isn't any clear understanding of what the need for these institutions, it pops up every single day.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking. The gender apartheid, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So this is a time to push these institutions to do better. And the best way you can push them to do better is to ask them to examine themselves and what is serving as the roadblocks to their ability to deliver, to finance the elimination of those roadblocks, shore up capacity so that they're better able to support governments, because that's what they're set up to do.
That's right.
To support governments to deliver those plans. At the same time, support civil society to be part of that. If we don't do that now, UN Women estimates that we will never achieve gender equality, I think, in 150 years from now.
Yeah.
That's where we're going to go back.
We can't afford
with the
that.
Rise, we can't. We cannot. I don't even think women are going to even let that happen. I don't think so.
No.
It's going to be a tough one, but with all we are seeing across the board, gender ministries being shut down as we speak, you understand? It gives us a glimpse into what is in front of us. But, what I'm happy about is that for every reaction, there's a counter reaction. It's going to reinvigorate the movement. is going to be the English is failing me, but it's going to bring us back to work in coordinated ways like we did pre-Beijing, that we did pre-Cairo 94 and 95. And we are going to push hard. I have all faith in the movement. I have all faith in feminist movements. You know, these are people I work with on a day-to-day basis, whether it's in the halls of the UN or whether it is in a small room somewhere in South Africa or in Buenos Aires. I have a lot of faith. And I think if anything, we are gonna push back. We're not gonna take this line down.
No.
And we are gonna be grateful for it. Yeah. But you know, when I listen to Gita, when I listen to, you know, others that have actually done this work, Nayad Sai and others have done this work before me, they have shown that we have had our ups and downs. The BCs, we've had our ups and downs. And this is just another moment we're gonna bounce back.
Yeah. Thank you for this.
It might not be funded. No. It might not be funded, but we will find it.
But we will. The revolution is on. All right. Thank you for this, Kemi. This is so interesting, so illuminating, and so invigorating. I feel, you know, of course, you have my full support, and I do share your optimism and or at least your hope. Yeah, I share your hope.
My hope.
Exactly. Yes. A luta continua.
Exactly.
They will not prevail. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. And we're always happy to come on board and share our analysis and share what the amazing work of amazing partners across the Global South are doing as part of the First Feminist Alliance.
That's so great. Thank you so much. Take care.
Expire.